Welcome back. This is part 2 of this dynamic conversation with the amazing Jason Primrose. If you've not heard the first part, go back, listen to it, and then come back to this because you will miss a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff. So hop in here. Here we go.
So, what is your overall vision for the universe? And I think about going back to the conversation about ego, you don't seem to have an attachment of ownership to it, which is what leads to this question of what you want the universe to be.
I want the universe to be a transformative experience that is global, that shows BIPOC and LGBTQ plus individuals how powerful they are inherently born, just walk out the womb that way, and how powerful we can be if we all band together, as a human race. So what that looks like, are millions of copies sold, translated into, X number of languages. It is one of those like Game of Thrones, Umbrella Academy, WandaVision-esque television shows, series. It is animation like Castlevania.
It was. I want more. I want more. Everybody's like, it got weird. I'm like, no, it was getting good. Like, I
It was
want
getting good. It was a great story the second season. It was
Yeah.
really awesome. And parks, it's programs, it's books gifted to youth. It's people being able to create inside the world, having that be an avenue or a path to their own creativity or their own stories. I thought of this story after reading a book, when I was 10. So I know the power of like reading something and then being inspired to like continue the tale in your own way with your own people. So that's the cool thing. Is I already know in my heart that the experience is transformative, and because it transformed me, and that's really all the example that I need, is that in writing 2050Z, I became a completely different, well, maybe became my original self, but I changed, I transformed through the writing.
What was that book that you read when you were 10? Like, and how did it bring you to this?
It was called Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher. I'm sure no one reads that book anymore, but I used to do those reading as fundamental things. I just picked it up off the shelf. Loved it. I love dragons. Loved dragons. And I wanted to continue the story. I was like, well, what happens if the humans try to like you? I was 10. I was like, what happens if the humans kidnap the dragons and try to use them for labor? Where does this stuff come from? So in my story, the humans go and they kidnap the dragons and they try to use them as labor, like cows or horses or whatever. And then Jeremy comes back and tries to save them, except Jeremy's black now, and he's basically me. And there's another character who's named Lisa, who he's friends with, who helps him defeat the humans, defeat the evil general, and free the dragons. And Lisa is still a character in the book. She's still the supporting main character. And she's still pretty much like the same. Like the idea of her is pretty similar. And then like later they touch the dragon scales and they get superpowers, and it's this whole thing. And that's what it's honestly, I like.
So you basically wrote the book, like you wrote the book you wanted, like you wrote what you wanted, and also for you, because
Yeah,
I'm guessing, like, I mean, I love Lord of the Rings. Like, I will always love it, but I will also question why I don't see myself in it. And so you kind of you wrote the book you wanted and put yourself in it so that little you could read it now and be like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? So you've talked a little bit about your background, your relationship with your mom.
Mhm.
Um, what was your childhood like that has inspired the desire to build a transformative universe for other people?
Oh, that's a powerful question. By the way, I have great relationships with both of my parents, my dad and my mom, and they're very different as well, but they're both huge nerds.
Mm.
So Fantasia, I always talk about this because Fantasia is still my favorite movie of all time. My dad would let me watch Fantasia over, like, just on repeat. And so I would just sit there, no words, and just watch and my favorite sequences were the dinosaur ones and and
Yeah.
and the mythology ones, but I would just watch that over and over and over and over and over again. And that's all. It's pretty much all every time I went to his house, I was like, "Dad, put on Fantasia." And but I was really encouraged to be creative. I was encouraged to write, not necessarily publish, but I was encouraged to write always, by everyone in my family. So and read. So it became just natural that I was always reading something. And if I wasn't reading something, I was normally writing something. And if I wasn't doing either of those things, I was watching something that was in that genre of like wild imagination, fantasy, sci-fi. Um, yeah, so I think I lived in an imaginary world, and that's probably most of it. I did have, I had two-step parents. I had half siblings that came a little bit later in my life, and I had to find ways to entertain myself. Because when you're like 8 years old and you have like a newborn brother, 9 years old newborn sister, 10 years old another newborn brother, and the other one's like 2. There's not a lot of room for paying attention, to me. So I learned to play alone and read and write, and I was always kind of in my own stuff as a kid. So I think that, and then like in the afternoons, like my parents worked, so like I had free time. So a lot of the time I spent alone, and I spent creating in some form or fashion. Yeah. But yeah, I was one of those kids that was like very uncomfortable, played by myself, had interesting friendships. Like I learned to morph myself very early at a very early age, like to like bob and weave so that I would be accepted and liked. Whatever that looked like. It was, I was like a chameleon. And because that was like, I was like, oh well, this is how it works. Like I need to be accepted, right? Like I can't like sit in the corner and just like read books all the time. Like I need to talk to people. So um I would be, if I needed to disrupt class and be funny, then I would do that. If I needed to make fun of somebody, I would do that. If I needed to pretend I didn't like boys, I would do that. If I needed to dress like, baggy pants, like I did it all. I've done it all. Get bad grades on purpose. Like I've literally done it all. Um,
What's been the positive and negative out of that for you?
I mean, I guess the positive is I learned how to move through the world in a very specific way, and I did form relationships with people. And the cool thing is, like, I'm working on a project with two guys from my childhood. One I've known literally since I was 5. We played in the sandbox together, and one of them I met in middle school, and I wrote the first version of this book in that novel form in that class. Um,
Wow.
it's
Wow.
like hidden in a notebook. But um, Don and I were both nerds, but like I pretended not to be sometimes. So I actually wasn't a great friend to him when we were in school. But the thing is that like who I am fundamentally is who I am fundamentally. And so like, I mean, all that stuff doesn't matter now. It's like 20 years past, but we're now connecting at a place of like nostalgia, but also like absolute love for like creating science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, and all of that. So I think that anyone who I met, who I was morphing for, I probably didn't need to morph for those people. I could have just been me and I would have been fine because here I am, fine, and being me.
How has it shaped your ability to write those characters?
I hate you. I hate you.
Yeah.
I was literally
That's
asking
good.
the same bloody question, mate. Like, I hate you.
Amazing. I'm glad that you guys came to that psychologically at the same time, telepathically. I am okay. So we were talking about some things about like the suppression. I am so excited for you to read this book, Rodney, and Keith, if you get it too, because there's so much. The characters was like my thing. Like if I was ever insecure about anything, I'll tell you two things I'm not insecure about: world building and character development. I know it. I know it. Dialogue I'm good at. So I can tell you that the character experience is very rich and connective. Like I know that to be true. And that is even in my like malleability with people, I was still fundamentally, like I said, like curious and attentive and listening. So I learned a lot about people over the years. And now I would say like using that power for good, which is to translate people's experiences versus using it for evil, which is figuring out how to like get people to like me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in doing all of that and then exploring myself, I was able to write the characters so much more authentically. And so that they feel very human. They feel real. Like what I've heard from readers is like the world feels real, and I think that most of that is anchored in like how real the characters feel inside of what they're going through and what they're fighting against. And then the world is a character itself. There's like kind of like 7 or 8 different places we go to, and they each feel like their own. They feel like their own character as well as you travel the kind of the United Sanctuaries of America and see the destruction. And so it wouldn't have, I wouldn't have been able to arrive at that without becoming really intimate with myself and becoming intimate with the relationships that I had formed with people that were not where I wasn't completely authentically myself either. So I got to look at both of those.
I'm excited to read it. I personally, the two things that I look for in stories and shows and books are characters and world building. I think world building may be number one, and then characters and dialogue. Like I think those things. We all have our different things that we look for in like, but I like those, and I asked about the chameleon thing because I very much was that, and or I anchor on that because I very much was that, and I wonder how much of so there was the survival thing, being a black man, being a gay black man, how like I'm guessing that played into it. I feel like being black for me played into is like, oh, I just gotta like not like I can't help but be seen, but I want to be seen as little as possible so that I can just keep it moving. Was kind of how I felt. I don't. Did you get any of that or?
Yeah. It's interesting to walk into the world and automatically kind of be taught that the world is a dangerous place for you, but then also that you're a dangerous person for the world. So like, how do you reconcile that? That like everything that I am is fundamentally incorrect, or there's something wrong with it. And that's what the outside perception is, which means that then the world is dangerous for me. But then also that people look at me and think that I'm the danger to, traditional heteronormative structure or the church or the morality of the world, or the white supremacist system, like, you know, and so and this is something I learned from my parents too, right? It's like we have to. I think it kind of like my parents were definitely like pioneers in the ways that they like. My mom is like crazy pioneer. Like she went in on and did a ton of stuff, and it's less get in where you fit in, but like make a space for yourself. But it didn't become like make a space for yourself and then make noise in that space until much later. So when I was growing up, I would say that the kind of the mom I know now is not the mom I grew up with. So I learned early on to make myself available and agreeable so that I could get places. And then that to me felt like a safe thing to do. It's like, this is how you're safe. And so I'm being trained, as a kid, like when I put my hand up and like do things that are feminine, and my grandfather would like slap my hand down and say, "Don't be a sissy," like things like that. And I was like, oh, well, okay. So then if I don't do that thing, then no one will know I'm a sissy, or they won't say that, they won't think that. Or, you know, if reading in the corner by myself on the playground is what a nerd does, then I could just do something different from that. And, and then I'll be not a nerd. If wearing baggy jeans makes me look cool. So I was being trained consistently, in this kind of like, and again, I was like kind of curious. It's like, oh, what happens if I do this or try this? And so I think that was part of the conditioning, was like, how do I move safely through the world? And but I was learning how to move through the world safely as myself, um, which actually involved me not being myself at all, for the most part.
Were you aware of it at the time, or have you become super aware of it in a reflective space?
I've become super aware of it in a reflective space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always had I think I said this when I was 16. I was like, I'm going to change how people perceive gay black men. That was just something that came to my head as I was coming out. Because I was like, there's like, I want anyone that meets me to have a completely different perspective on gay people if they were to come across someone in the future. And so a lot of guy friends that I do have, I'm their first gay friend or their first gay black friend, or whatever the case may be. So, and that has changed their, like, oh, I never would have thought, and I never would have, befriended someone. But now that's ridiculous. Like, to me, that's like a ridiculous thing to think, or even to say, because there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't, or you would stray away from like a certain type of person. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So I've actually, so that's why my perspective has shifted to empowering the people that are themselves, so that I don't feel like I need to change so that you like people like me. Like, you just like me or you don't. It's as simple as that. And I'm just going to be myself, and I'm going to be my powerful self, and I'm going to speak out, and I'm going to, build my vision, and I'm going to do the work that I want to do, that I'm passionate about, and you can just take it or leave it. So I think that's been the biggest change over the last couple of years, as I became more aware of like how what I did kind of worked, but in this climate is like not is not the thing. It's not the actual thing that has you living in your power, has me living in my power. Yeah.
Because I was kind of thinking about that as you asked that question, and I think I was aware of some pieces of it similarly. Like, Like when people are like, "You're black," and I'm like, "I'm brown," and they're like, "You're black," and like I just like had this cognitive dissonance. Like this doesn't make sense. Like what you're telling me just doesn't register. What I don't think I had awareness of. I don't think I felt I had a voice to actually like do anything about it or say anything about it. And then like with books, loved reading, and I just something was off. I didn't know what it was, and it was many years later where I look back and I'm like, oh, like you got elves and dwarves and dragons and
Mhm.
demons, but no black people, no Asian. Like it's really weird. Like now I look back and I'm like, oh, I get what I sensed was missing. I just couldn't put my finger on it when I was younger.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think I said this yesterday. It's like funny because God gave me this story when I was 10, and I like spent however many years writing the first version, and then I took a break and I did marketing for 10 or 11 years. But this is going to be the thing that that is the like culmination of my entire existence, like all of this together, of like the me in the world, me being powerful in the world, and then the story being the catalyst for other people being powerful in the world. And the great, it's also already happening. So people are
Mm,
already seeing what I'm doing and already being inspired to write their own stories. And so that's the other thing to remember for me, and when it comes to ego, is like I'm already living, I'm already doing the thing. It's already happening.
Mm.
And but the piece of it that is important is that these stories, like Harry Potter, you couldn't say a bad thing about Harry Potter. People are like die hard. The fact that there are no stories like this, like that feature, that are so like mass scale, that are not literary but more Children of Blood and Bone is a growing property. I see that being one of the first trilogies to be this, like, everyone knows who Zelly is, like she's going to be a global household name. um but that's one.
hmm
I mean, we're just gonna have to see how it unfolds. A lot of people publish BIPOC work, and a lot of people don't know it exists. So, to have a character like an Alistair, um, who I feel like is so relatable, be something that people can someone that people can root for, I think it will change the dynamics of like how especially black men are viewed, which I think is also an important. Um, yeah.
As much as your mission now is to inspire other BIPOC creators to create and build universes and expand and grow on yours and whatever the case may be, how much underneath is there still that desire to make this change perspective?
Mm,
Or do you not care?
it will change perspective,
Yeah.
because what happens is once people start to change how they see themselves, it will change how they see the world.
Mm.
So the work is actually inner, right? To read a book like this and feel more powerful in yourself,
Mm,
will actually change the way you see power in the world and what it actually means, right? Like it's redefining power. Um, so I think that is it's part of the experience.
Love that.
love
Well,
it. I'm gonna
listen.
bring it home with our last question, but first, I want to thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation, and
Mhm.
I already have notes for 5 follow-up things to hit you up with. Oh, 6. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts and energy.
Thank you, Jason, for all that you're doing and for joining us on the show. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a very
The world needs all 8 of these books, needs it or more, whatever it's going to be. Like, we need it. So keep it going. The last question is a simple one, or at least I think it is. What does compassion mean to you?
Compassion to me right now is actually presence.
Mm.
It is you're already living the life you want to live. Compassion is you're I'm doing the thing. And I am the person to be doing it. And yeah, compassion is like I am me, and that's enough.